News alert, President Trump and the White House going on the offensive big time against the first indictments from special counsel Robert Mueller. They insist this has nothing to do with the campaign. Let's go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. Former campaign chair Paul Manafort and his associate Rick Gates under house arrest after they both pleaded not guilty yesterday to 12 charges, including conspiracy and money laundering. Top administration officials say their alleged misdeeds happened long before they either met the president or were associated with the campaign. Furthermore, they say the same holds true for former campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, who's pleaded guilty to lying to FBI agents. President Trump tweeted this: "The fake news is working overtime," as Paul Manafort's lawyer said. There was no collusion, and events mentioned took place long before he came to the campaign. Few people knew the young, low-level volunteer named George, who has already proven to be a liar. Check the Dems! Exclamation point. But the leader of the Senate's Democrats, Chuck Schumer, is not buying the official White House line. He says the indictments show Mueller is progressing in a very serious way. Watch that.
What we know now is that an alleged unregistered foreign agent who is charged with laundering tens of millions of dollars from foreign governments on behalf of their agenda was given the chairmanship of a campaign for the presidency of the United States, and with it, untold influence on a future president and his party.
White House correspondent Kevin Corker joins us now live from the North Lawn. Kevin?
Okay, I have to tell you, in a week in which we're going to hear the White House talk about tax reform, they're going to announce a new Fed chair, and clearly we have this big Asia trip coming up. It is obvious, Harris, that they would love to turn the conversation toward anything other than the ongoing Mueller investigation. But that said, it is still a very difficult turn for this White House, because even though they recognize that they have a huge agenda they'd like to get going, in Washington, that's what people are going to talk about. They're going to talk about the Mueller investigation, right? That's sort of how it goes. Now, if you're wondering, though, today, as the president actually holds this tax reform rollout meeting right here at the White House, if you're wondering if just maybe he might want to take a stab at talking about the Mueller investigation, once again feeding into this idea that it's fake news, you'd be wrong. But that said, it is still a very difficult
I want the House to pass a bill by Thanksgiving. I want all of the people standing by my side. When we get ready to sign by Christmas, hopefully before Christmas, you'll all be in the room standing front row center. I think we'll be able to find a place where you can all stand front row center. It'll be a big event. It'll be the biggest tax event in the history of our country.
There you go. Yeah, he bypassed a chance to talk about it. When he was asked about it, the president just said, "Thank you. No, really, thank you." Meanwhile, while the president is obviously trying to turn the conversation toward tax reform, a lot of people are still going to be talking about a young man that I'm going to show you his picture. We're talking about George Papadopoulos. Of course, he issued a guilty plea, a former low-level staffer. That guilty plea coming, announced yesterday. This is, of course, he's been working with the Mueller investigation since this summer when he was arrested over at Dulles. You've got that plus the multiple count indictment of former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort. You heard, of course, Mr. Schubert talk about him. This continues to garner intense scrutiny. And you know, for good measure, we expect this all to be on the table. When the White House press briefing gets underway shortly after 2 o'clock, we'll see what Sarah Sanders has to say about all this. But it is clear the White House has a singular focus. This is not about Russia collusion between the Trump administration and the Russians. This is about, as they would put it, a political witch hunt. In the meantime, they've got the business of the American people to continue, and that's likely to be the message here today.
A lot of talk on the economy, a lot of business. You saw the president meeting with corporate and small business leaders just last hour. And Kevin, did I say Corker? Because I know it's Corker.
Yeah, it happens, though. In fact, good friends sometimes call me Casey Sunshine Band, and I get Corker half the time. But I have a nickname for you. I think you know what it is.
You do? I don't have a nickname. I want one.
You are my favorite Minnesota North Star.
Aw, because I moved to New York from Minnesota. That is so sweet. Thank you. All right. Bye, Mr. Corker. A lot of talk on the economy, a lot of business. The president and his defenders quick to point out that the indictments of Manafort and his right-hand man do not show collusion with the Russians. That's what Kevin was just talking talking about or have anything to do with the Trump campaign. But do the charges hint at anything else? Let's bring in former federal prosecutor Doug Burns. Among Doug's areas of expertise, criminal defense and constitutional law. Those things often come in handy. Great to see you. All right, so it does beg the question, though. I mean, clearly, you can read it. You know that it doesn't have anything to do, I've had many attorneys tell me, with the White House. The problem is it's kind of what's around the president, who's around the president. And that's what maybe people are looking at, or what do you think?
You know what's interesting? If you didn't have the separate guilty plea report yesterday of Mr. Papadopoulos.
Is that problematic?
Well, no, it's not problematic. It just would have been even more intensely noted that it has nothing to do with collusion. Let's keep it simple. I mean, the time periods involved are before the campaign. It doesn't involve the campaign. That's not a political soundbite, by the way. Anybody watching me, oh, I can't believe he supports the president. That's not the point. Legally, there is nothing in that indictment that has to do with Russian collusion. Now, on the other side of it, with the guilty plea, there's a little bit of a sleight of hand going on, so it's worth pointing out. They turn around and say, they make it sound, number one, as though he pled guilty to a crime. He didn't, not an underlying crime. He pled guilty to lying about a chronology and the time period. And then, much more importantly, you must note that the meetings that it is alleged that he was going to set up, those meetings didn't take place, and the defense is going to be the Trump campaign wanted nothing to do with those meetings. And add in today's reporting that I think you were involved with, which is that the professor himself is calling it into doubt, which shows you the difference between probable cause, probably, and beyond a reasonable doubt. We'll see.
All right, what components do you look at for moving forward in all of this? I mean, we don't know what Mueller has. We don't know which direction he's going. But I know from talking with you as a federal prosecutor, you can sometimes give us a guide as where we might be going next.
If you were to ask me at halftime of a basketball game, Doug, who won, I can't tell you, because the game's not over. Now, in this particular instance, I find it so interesting that yesterday you had all the political sound bites flying back and forth. But here's my takeaway. Here's my crystal ball, as it were, Harris. The investigation's obviously going to progress along. I do not think that Paul Manafort's going to cooperate. Okay? I do think...
So, wait, I want to stop you right there. You don't think Paul Manafort will cooperate? Was that frustrated, just to use a little legal language there, was that frustrated by the fact of that no-knock raid?
Oh, it's a great point by you right there, of course. They took a scorched earth approach. First of all, you don't really do a search warrant. We analyze that in a white-collar case unless you think the documents might be destroyed or removed.
They're on fire in the living room.
Yeah, you don't do a no-knock warrant and kick the door in. I think that's sent. You know, there are those who praise Mueller. Oh, it shows how serious he is, but you can also condemn it because your point's such a good one. That might have alienated him, but I don't think he would have cooperated under any circumstances.
Okay, so that's number one.
Yeah. Number two, you have the P word lurking in the rafters. Let me explain. President Trump is not, repeat, not going to pardon anybody now.
You know he was asked about that today.
Right. But I'll tell you what, way down the road, that's always there. And as no less a figure than Professor Dershowitz has pointed out, it's within his constitutional authority to do that. It's also within his authority, it behooves me to point out, to simply commute any prison sentence without issuing a pardon. That's what happened with Scooter Libby and President George W. Bush. So the point is, this thing's a long way from being over. But to answer your question about where's it going, it's hard to say. But at the same time, the first blush seems a little weak. They've got Paul Manafort on financial crimes, but not collusion.
Anybody else who should be looking to lawyer up at this point based on what we know? Anybody either connected with Manafort, Rick Gates?
Well, that's sort of behind the scenes, and notwithstanding all of the leaking that's been going on, from my experience, many people have probably been contacted. Okay, we want to interview you. They then call a lawyer, obviously. The lawyer may say, he doesn't want to be interviewed. They say, well, we're going to issue a grand jury subpoena. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, maybe we'll work with you. So that type of tap dance, for lack of a better term, is going on as we speak. I don't know who exactly.
It is fascinating that you say Paul Manafort likely will not cooperate.
I don't see that.
And the president, again, in case people didn't catch it, at the very end of his corporate and small business leaders conversation that he just had about a half hour ago, he was asked, are you going to pardon Paul Manafort? He said, thank you very much, we're going to move on. Like he didn't, that's not why he was holding that conference, that pop-up news conference, if you will.
I mean, that's the
availability.
That's the intersection of politics and law. In other words, politically, it would really cause a crisis.
Well, you have guys like Senator Lindsey Graham who are saying, you don't want to touch this. I'm paraphrasing him, but you just want to let this kind of run its course. All right, Doug Burns, always great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for the fresh perspective on all this. So as the White House pushes back hard on the Mueller indictments, there are growing questions about what this could mean for the president and the Republicans' agenda. Will it slow it down? Will it focus it more? That's an opportunity, too. Let's bring in the Fox News politics editor and editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt. Chris, always great to see you. So on the positive side of this, I had New York Representative Lee Zeldin tell me right here on the set yesterday that this is a good thing that these indictments have come down, because now you can kind of focus in on other things and let this justice be done.
Well, right, we need a little time to chew on it, and we, I've read it all, pored over it, read the analysis. It takes us time to absorb, because remember, Team Mueller's been working on this for 5 months. They're moving pretty quickly, but where they are, we can only guess at where they're going to be. This will continue to be a distraction. It will continue to be a disruption for the administration itself. But I suppose you are right that for the Republicans in Congress, this can focus the thinking. There is real danger for the president potentially lurking out there in the shrubberies. So maybe you got to get going now on the agenda before it gets kablooed.
Is there really danger? I mean, I'm looking at some things here. There's the Atlantic wrote this article about why the president should worry less about Bob Mueller and more about Congress in terms of a flip in control to Democrats next year. And ultimately, when you've looked historically at other presidents who have had administration members or anybody even close to them looked at investigative style, it generally comes down to the party supporting that president. So you want to keep that bicameral majority.
Well, so Republicans, obviously, if they lose control of Congress, there's a very strong chance that Donald Trump will be impeached.
You think so?
If the Democrats got control of the House,
you don't think they focus on all the things that they say are important for the American people, like health care and getting that right? I mean, that's what the Democrats say.
These are politicians. When Republicans impeached Bill Clinton, I'm sure there were other things that the American people wished that they would have focused on, but they focused on satisfying a bloodthirsty base and impeaching the president, and I'm sure there would be many calls among Democrats to do the same. That's the real danger for Trump. Yes, that is true. But I would just say this. Mueller here is showing the danger for Trump is that he had what looks like a confidential informant working inside, working around the Trump organization, relying on those contacts. We don't know at all what is out there. This is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning, as David French said. We have no idea how this is going to play out. So maybe that does focus the attention of Republicans in Congress to say, we got to get stuff done for 2 reasons. One, because there could be a kablooey out there. But number 2, because if they don't, it increases the Democrats' chances of winning in midterms next year, and thereby puts everything at risk.
So you say it increases the chances. Why is that? Because when you look at other investigations that have gone on, they tend to take a long time, which is one of the reasons why you saw Representative DeSantis saying, can we focus all of these investigations in, and can we maybe shorten the timeline a little bit to keep them focused? It also spends less taxpayer money. I'm just throwing that in.
The only historical predicate that we have for this, the only analogy really that works, is the Whitewater investigation into Bill Clinton, and this is moving much quicker. Again, this is 5 months. We're not talking about years. We're already seeing charges filed. We're at 5 months. I think that Mueller knows that he is on the clock and he's got to go fast, and I have every expectation that this will continue to move at a much faster pace than similar investigations.
Real quickly before I let you go, and it's got to be fast. So I just said that Senator Lindsey Graham had talked about what would happen if you touch this investigation, specifically Robert Mueller. What you're hearing just in terms of what might happen.
If the president wants Republicans to turn on him, the easiest, best course to being abandoned by his own party would be to lay a single hand, or to lay a single finger on a single strand of Robert Mueller's hair. That would be the surest path to being stranded on a desert island for the president.
Yeah, there's no indication whatsoever of that. Lindsey Graham said, holy hell to pay if it were to happen for not a good reason. We want to complete the context on that. He said that there are some good reasons, but if it happened without them, that would be problematic. The Steyer is on fire all the time. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl unexpectedly took the stand in his defense at the sentencing portion of his ongoing military trial, and he made an emotional statement. We'll have it next. And the brother of the former Hillary Clinton campaign chairman has stepped down from his lobbying firm after coming under investigation by the special counsel, Robert Mueller. It It happened live during this program yesterday. We're going to talk more what this means for Democrats and the Russia investigation. Oh, yeah, they're part in it, too. Stay close.
You bet.
Tony Podesta, the brother of former Hillary Clinton campaign chair John Podesta, resigned from his lobbying firm about this time yesterday. We learned it after coming under investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. The Podesta group did work to benefit a pro-Russian Ukrainian party, although they've reportedly said they did not think their client was politically tied at the time. Mueller's team is looking into whether they failed to file the proper disclosure forms with the Justice Department. Here's what the president tweeted. The biggest story yesterday, the one that has the Dems in a dither, is Podesta running from his firm. What he knows about crooked Dems is earth-shattering. He and his brother could drain the swamp, which would be yet another campaign promise fulfilled. Fake News Week, exclamation point. Let's bring in Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia. He's vice chair of the House Republican Conference and a member of the Judiciary Committee. Representative Collins, great to have you today. I want you, if you can, just to break it down for us and tell us what's most important about what's happened now that Tony Podesta has stepped away from a firm with his name on it.
Well, I think what's happened is we're beginning to see that this whole circle, this whole mess is the Democrats have been trying to spin this web and story about the Russian involvement in the indictments that came down yesterday. But what's amazing is on the way to the party, they finally got caught themselves. And I think Podesta is stepping away. These clients have been stepping away for most of the year now. They see the connection that's going on here. I think the interesting thing is here is when you look at the two brothers Podesta, my question is they're trying to deflect off to a Russian investigation or collusion. My question is, you just had a bad candidate. Hillary was a bad candidate who didn't relate to the American people, who didn't get out and campaign, who didn't work, who didn't do the things she promised. And Donald Trump went to the American people and said, you want to see something different in Washington, and that's what we're going to focus on. So Tony dropping away from a lobbying group that's having trouble and getting caught in this web, I just say, well, turnabout's fair play sometimes.
Judiciary Committee, the word is justice. So what does justice look like when it comes to the Podesta firm and this connection, Tony Podesta and his brother who worked for Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think if you want to fire shots, if you want to be the Podesta group and you're with Clinton and you've been talking about the misfortune of last year and then dealing with Russia, then if you're part of this, then Mueller was going to, the investigation is going to find out where you're at. If you didn't file the proper paperwork, then you're going to pay the price for that. If you're not doing what you said you're supposed to be doing, then you're going to find out about that. If you're paying for things in opposition research that end up getting used in different ways, those are the kind of things that we just have to look at here. And I just simply think this is something that he's stepping away from. We'll see how it moves from here. But, again, I think this all goes back down to a thing with many Democrats. They're wanting to do everything they can to get us away from an agenda that is focused on the American people. That's tax reform this week. You want to talk about something that's really good? It's tax reform this week. The investigations will handle themselves. I want to talk about putting more money in the pockets of families out there so they know how to spend it and make dreams for themselves instead of Democrats dreaming about what could have been last November when they lost the election.
You know, Congressman Collins, and I hear you talking about that, and the economy is a firm focus, and you've got what's coming down in terms of tax legislation that the whole country will get to see tomorrow. Today, Democrats, though, have a vision about where they want the focus to be. And I want to share you some tweets by John Podesta, Tony's brother, Tony Podesta, who just walked away from the firm bearing their family's name. John Podesta tweeted this: "Not bad enough that I was the victim of a massive cybercrime directed by the Russian president. Now I'm the victim of a big lie campaign by the American president." At Real Donald Trump, which we know is the president's Twitter handle, seems a lot more worried now than July 2016 when he asked the Russians to hack our campaign. Your response to that? And I want to share you some tweets.
This is ridiculous. This is somebody who ran a campaign that was terrible. You're trying to deflect off your own work. At this point in time, the president won. He's working on an agenda for the American people. John Podesta, look, I would do anything I could to diffuse blame for myself as well. You had a candidate that didn't work. You had a campaign structure that you yourself was a part of that did not do what it said it was going to do, and you ended up in November doing exactly what should have happened. You lost. So let's quit this idea. You were part of this game. You've been part of D.C. forever. Let's work and to say what we're going to do for the American people. And John, if you want to spin it that way, then go right ahead. I think the Podesta group has a lot to answer for. They're going to answer for it in this investigation. We'll see where it goes from there. I'm going to support the president. We're going to support tax reform for the American people because that's what they voted for last November.
All right, real quickly before I let you go, Congressman Collins of the great state of Georgia, I want to get that in case we have to let you scoot. So look, it was paperwork that they're looking at with this firm. And did they have a client that maybe had ties to Russia and they didn't file the right paperwork? You say there's a lot to look at with the Podesta firm. Give me another example. And what does paying for this look like? What does accountability look like?
Well, I think accountability is let's just live up to the fact. I mean, paperwork matters in these kind of situations. We saw that a little bit in the indictments that came out yesterday. Paperwork does matter here. Paperwork matters in a lot of things, and I think so. We just look forward to it. Let the investigation do what it's supposed to do. I think we spend a lot of time focused on that. The Democrats would love for us to focus on that. I'm going to choose to focus on letting the investigation go where it leads, let it pick up them in the Podesta group, and go from there. We're going to focus on what matters to the American people, and this president, I think, understands that as well.
All right, and I take it from what you said, you're on board with tax reform, so we'll see that and what happens moving forward. By the way, I was born in the Peach State. Just a little disclosure there for you.
Hey, for all of us in Georgia, go Dogs. We're having a good year, and it's good to have you from there.
Thank you. Have a great day. Appreciate you joining us here on the program. A surprise moment during convicted Army deserter Bo Bergdahl's sentencing hearing. If you didn't see it, you have to check this out. What Bergdahl is now saying to the soldiers wounded while they were searching for him. And Republicans prepare to release their tax reform plan. You just heard the congressman from Georgia talking about this. The House's chief tax writer now says the state income tax deduction. Remember that? SALT, state and local. That's what they've been kind of going back and forth. Will not remain the way we see it. How will that sit with Republicans from high-tax states like New York? We've had convicted Army deserter Bo Bergdahl unexpectedly took the stand at his sentencing hearing. Bergdahl apologized to the soldiers who were injured while searching for him in Afghanistan after he walked off his post and was later captured by the Taliban. Jonathan Seri is live with the latest on this. Jonathan?
Yeah, hi, Harris. Bergdahl's testimony is focused in large part on the harsh conditions he faced as a prisoner of the Taliban. He described routine beatings with copper wire and said he was kept in a small cage, never knowing if the next person to open the door was going to be his executioner. Bergdahl said, quote, "The worst was the constant, just the constant deterioration of everything, the constant pain from my body falling apart, the constant screams from my mind." Bergdahl, who's already pleaded guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy, could face as much as life in prison for walking off his post in Afghanistan back in 2009. He was freed in exchange for the release of 5 Taliban detainees from Guantanamo Bay, and the prosecution is focused on injuries sustained by some of the servicemen who searched for Bergdahl after his disappearance. For their last witness, they called Shannon Allen, whose husband took a bullet to the head during an ambush. National Guard Master Sergeant Mark Allen was left paralyzed and unable to speak. His wife described how her husband is unable to reach out and hold their daughter. During Bergdahl's testimony, the Army sergeant apologized, saying, "I would like everyone who searched for me to know it was never my intention for anyone to be hurt, and I never expected that to happen." Now, Bergdahl's lawyers have been trying to argue that negative comments by President Trump may have jeopardized their client's ability to get a fair sentence, but the military judge in this case says those comments by the commander-in-chief have not had a direct effect on this military court, nor the public's perception of the fairness of the process. Harris?
Jonathan, thank you very much. President Trump is calling on House lawmakers to pass a tax bill by Thanksgiving. The House GOP is preparing to release details of its tax reform plan tomorrow. The top House Republican on tax policy, Kevin Brady, in a radio interview has said the plan will now not include a deduction for state and local income taxes. Remember, that was a big sticking point for Republicans and Democrats. It will, however, have a provision for property taxes. Watch.
Is there going to be any relief on the income tax side of the state and local tax deduction?
So the answer is no, and here's why. Because we have some taxes reduced from across the board and added the property tax because all lawmakers in those high tax states really believe their families are being punished the most by property taxes.
Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer says this, quote, "If any American needed needed more proof this bill would be a boon for the wealthy at the expense of the middle class. They should look no further than this provision, end quote. GOP Congressman Mike Kelly serves on the House Ways and Means Committee. They're writing this legislation. Right on time to have you. Thanks for being here. What do you say in rebuttal to Senator Schumer?
I think Senator Schumer's comments are consistent. You know, with the health care bill was we have to pass it, and then we'll read it to find it with what's in it. And with our piece right now, it's, well, we got to trash it before we read it. So that's consistent, and it's something to be expected. But you know what? We've got a job to do. We're done. This is rug cutting time. It's time to get it done, and that's what we're working on right now. Plus, you know, Harris, this is generational. The implications, not only for us right here at home, but globally, are incredibly important, and that's what we're working on. And that's the area we're trying to get to, and that's our goal, is to make sure that every person looks at what we did in America and say, you know what, we're competitive again, we're keeping our jobs at home, we're allowing our industries to grow, and we're making sure that hard-working middle-income and lower-income people have more take-home pay. They get to keep more of the money they earn instead of shipping it off to the federal government. So I think it's a wonderful day for America.
All right, so Kevin Brady was just explaining, and it makes a lot of sense. He says, look, you're going to reduce taxes across the board. I want to get back to the SALT, the state and local tax situation, because it's been such a sticking point. When you all went to pass the budget last week, you had 20 members who decided, and if you'd had 2 more, it wouldn't have passed. You had 20 members who decided they were going to cast a no vote in protest. It didn't jeopardize the budget passing, which set us up for majority vote on tax reform, but it did send a strong message about how important it is for people to be able to, particularly in high-tax states like New Jersey, New York, some in California, had pushed against this. So my question is, how did you get to property taxes? And it wasn't lost on many of us that 10% of your home value, Congressman, can sometimes be depleted if you can't write off your taxes, because that means you have to drop your price for people too. But I want to know how you got there and what happens to SALT.
Look, you know, I think we look at all of this is there's certain times, and it really depends on the member and where they're from, and you've got to look at what they're saying and say, you know what, I've got to understand what it's like for somebody in those states and those representatives, what they're going through. When we ever turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to what's going on with them, then we've really vacated what our responsibility is to each other. So listen, I know there's going to be accommodations made, and we're going to keep working on it. We've got a deadline, and there's nothing better than a deadline, as you know, Harris. If you don't have a deadline, it's just idle chatter. I want to get to the real discussion. I want to get to the real concerns that each member has and say, you know what, we're going to work with you. We're going to get there. But at the end of the day, we're going to be some people that are happy, and there's going to be some people that are really happy. That's our goal, and that's what we're fixed with, and that's something we just have to do.
Congressman Kelly, is there anything else out there that is a sticking point? I know you talked about maybe lowering the amount that you could put into your retirement 401k from $18,000 to $2,400. That went away. You found a way around that. Even the president talked about that. What else is looming out there that some of these lawmakers are coming to the table with?
Well, you know what, Harris, it depends who it is that you talk to, and it depends what the major issues are and the people they represent. And I think this process, and this is a process, as you know, we're going to roll out language. We're going to put text out there tomorrow. That's our goal. That's what we're shooting for. And then we're going to enter into the real debate as we move forward, because it still has to go through the Senate, and we have to get it to the president's desk by Thanksgiving. But I think having an open mind and then listening to other people's really critical points of what's really affects them at home, not just as Republicans or Democrats, but what if just as Americans, we've got to take care of each other, and we've got to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We've got to become competitive globally. We've got to keep jobs here. We've got to get jobs back. But more importantly than anything else, we've got to see people get more take-home pay. That's our goal. And corporately, we have to make sure that we can compete with anybody in the world and win.
You know, you saw the president today meeting with corporate and small business owners at the leaders at the White House. And what you got from that was the focus from this president, particularly on the corporate tax. You're seeing a slide now, a discussion that you would phase in a corporate tax over a 5-year period, which is a very different sell and a very different impact on this economy. If you drop it from, you know, where it is now in the 30s to 20%, but you do that over 5 years. Why the shift?
Well, I think what we're looking for again is a transition into a new tax plan altogether. And how do you do that? You just can't come straight down and crash. You have to have a glide path to get there. But I would say this. Those are all concepts that are being put out there right now. This is part of the debate. And this is the way it's supposed to be in the people's house. This is what we're supposed to be. All 435 of us represent very different districts. In some cases very similar, but different. If we don't come to Washington with the best interests of those folks who are from our district, and I don't care how they vote, I'm talking about what's in their best interest. If we can't do that, then we're here for the wrong reasons. The president, we've got a wonderful leader at the top right now who understands business and understands where the United States is today because of taxes that are way too heavy and regulations that have actually choked us off. We're working on things to clear that climate up to make sure that America is in the lead in every single thing that we do. And we are going to make America great again because we're going to make a tax cuts, the greatest tax cuts that people have seen in over 3 decades. That is unbelievable good news for every single hardworking American taxpayer.
Well, that's how they're being talked about. I wrote down what you said, a glide path for tax reform, because people have a lot of questions about that corporate tax being phased in. From the great state of Pennsylvania, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today, Representative Mike Kelly.
Thanks, Harris. Time to fish or cut bait.
America
is in the lead in every single thing that we do.
I love fishing, and so I get that. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski sounded off on the FBI. He says it should have warned him, that agency, about Paul Manafort before the campaign hired him. Is he right about that? Should the FBI have raised a red flag about Paul Manafort? Stay with us. He aired some new concerns after the special counsel slapped former campaign chair Paul Manafort with a 12-count indictment. Lewandowski is now going after the FBI, saying that agency should have warned him if Manafort were under surveillance before he was hired. Watch.
If you are the Republican or Democratic nominee for a major political party running for president of the United States, and there is a person who is joining the campaign in a high-profile capacity, and that person happens to be under some type of surveillance by the FBI for potential wrongdoings, you would think that just from a security standpoint, they would come and brief the campaign and say, look, we've got some concerns about this person. You're still welcome to hire them, but at least we make you aware of it. That never occurred.
Is he right about that? Let's bring in our power panel, Jessica Tarlov, Senior Director of Research for Bustle.com, and Jason Chaffetz, former Utah Congressman. Both are Fox News contributors. I'm going to come to you first, Congressman. So, national security issues. I mean, this is important. Does Lewandowski have a point?
No, he doesn't. The FBI, law enforcement, should be doing their investigations and not injecting themselves into political campaigns. It is up to the political campaign to do their own vetting. And remember, he pled not guilty, right? This person is presumed innocent. And I'm sorry, but it's not the FBI's job to go in and say, hey, you're making a bad, decision on your personnel. I mean, it's unfair to the person who's the subject of that investigation, because he could be in the clear, probably ruin and destroy his career. And the second part of it is, he's a political candidate at that point, Donald Trump.
Even if the country that was in question was Russia.
Well, it could be Russia, it could be China, it could be Ecuador. It doesn't matter. That's not the job and role of the FBI. They're trying to keep that as secret as possible. That's how they do these investigations. And at that point, if they're getting a FISA warrant, they've gone to a judge and made the case that we have some cause here to actually surveil this person. You don't give a heads up to his boss and say, hey, by the way, this person's under surveillance.
I'll circle back with you on that, but I see a nod coming from Jessica.
What do they say? I yield my time to the Congress.
I know the bar is low, you guys have said, for how often you actually agree, but you're nodding.
They're trying to keep that totally nodding, and I think that most people who are being objective and fair right now are nodding, no matter their partisan affiliation. We want the FBI to be as non-politicized as possible. Corey Lewandowski went out there last night and did everything that he could to not blame Donald Trump. That's what he does.
Well, he's not mentioned in the indictment. The president.
But not blame Donald Trump for the poor judgment in hiring Paul Manafort. You could just go on Google and take a look at the stories that have been written about Paul Manafort, the people that he has dealt with in the past, the accounts, the parties he's worked for, what he's done in Ukraine and Russia, and you would know that this is not someone you want running your campaign.
I would say, Congressman, because of the role that Paul Manafort, though, played in the campaign, I mean, he was brought in for the delegate rounding up, and he did what he was supposed to do.
He did. And look, they put together a winning campaign, but there doesn't need to be a group of people at the FBI saying, should we tell them, should we not tell them? You know, when they're under surveillance.
Well, you wouldn't have been able to find that on Google. I mean, come on, be fair about this.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you would know that Paul Manafort is an unsavory character and has been for many decades from looking at his past track record, who he associates with. You should also know that Roger Stone is not the best person to have around.
The name that drips from the ceiling is Podesta today. That is the name that falls, and I have to get out of the way to keep from getting hit.
It hasn't hit me at all.
No, I think yesterday had two big sort of bombshells in Washington, D.C. I think it's the Podestas, the relationship between the two brothers, and the proximity to the Uranium One issue. I still think
and the former Secretary of State.
Yes, I still think that Uranium One is the biggest issue in the room. You have hundreds of millions of dollars transferring hands. You have, at the surface, why would the United States of America give up 20% of its uranium to Russian
interests? We're back to normal now.
Yeah, I completely disagree. We'll talk more about that, though, because I do want to get into that, but I want to kind of put a button on all of this, because going forward, I mean, what are you expected to do? You're running a campaign. You're talking about Googling. I'm not going to find out about an FBI investigation on Google.
No, you absolutely are, but can you imagine the uproar if this happened in the reverse? If the FBI had tipped off Hillary Clinton or, Robbie Mook or some Podesta and said, hey, you know what, this guy you're about to hire, he's under FBI investigation. We would be running wall-to-wall coverage.
Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do. And I also believe that it's very unfair to the person who has not been convicted yet. They're just under surveillance. And then they came forward and pled not guilty.
Right, not like the other guy.
And it wasn't even charged with anything that was happening during the campaign.
Right, it's outside. Okay, stick tight, because I know it's about to get chippy. As we talk a little bit about that Uranium One deal, remember the President of the United States said that this controversy over Russia scooping up energy, making a big energy buy, while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, is the story of the decade. We'll talk about it. Stick close.
Convicted yet? They're just under surveillance, and then they came forward and pled not guilty.
Right, not like the other guy.
And they wasn't even charged with anything that was happening during the campaign.
Right, it's outside.
Hi everyone, I'm Dana Perino, and we're waiting for some big live events. Sarah Sanders will brief the press in our hour, and you can bet most questions will center on the Mueller investigation. Then Facebook, Twitter, and Google execs set to testify on Capitol Hill about how much or how little the Russians spread fake news on your social media accounts. And we'll ask the tax reform author, Congressman Kevin Brady, what all this means for tomorrow's big tax reform rollout. That's coming up on the Daily Briefing.
White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says he supports appointing a special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton's campaign funding, the controversial Trump-Russia dossier, and the Russian Uranium One deal approved under the Obama administration. Here's General Kelly speaking with Fox's Laura Ingraham.
Should there be another special
I guess so. I mean, again, not a lawyer. One of the strengths I have in looking at issues in my job, I think probably as a layman looking at this kind of thing, we need to find someone who's very, very objective, who can get to the bottom of these accusations. I think it's important. Again, the American people have an absolute right to know these things.
So I wonder what Clinton said. Here it is. The uranium deal reports have been debunked repeatedly, she says. We're back with our power panel, Jessica Tarlov and Jason Chaffetz. So, debunked?
No. America doesn't know about this deal. The fact that they had 9 cabinet-level secretaries have to sign off on this. More than $100 million changes hands into the Clinton Foundation. There's a lot more that needs to be exposed there. And when you couple that with the dossier and the funding between the DNC, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and in her campaign, and Obama for America, more than $10 million goes into that.
I want to step back and just lean in a little bit on the cash that went into Clinton's hands. You say the Clinton Foundation. It does smell of access to a former president and a sitting Secretary of State. It smells like that, Jessica.
Well, some things smell like things and they aren't things. Like, I don't know what to say beyond the fact that the timeline, pizza is delicious. The timeline of the donations that went to the Clinton Foundation don't add up with this deal. And as you pointed out, it's 9 cabinet level secretaries. It's already been made clear clear that Secretary Clinton was actually not the point person for this. So I understand the State Department was one of the bureaucracies that did sign off on it. But I mean, it's interesting to me that General Kelly is using this interview to talk about that. And he said that the Mueller investigation is a distraction for President Trump. I mean, you can make whatever case that you want about it. It's important to be looking into what happened while Hillary was Secretary of State or Obama. And we also have to acknowledge, obviously, that the dossier began with Republicans.
Can I make just one comment about looking into it and wanting it? This isn't necessarily a political thing, though. And the way that you're shaping it, that's kind of how I see it. And you can make fun of the smell, but I'll tell you which somebody who the test is not passing for, Leon Panetta, the former defense secretary under Obama. He even says this needs to be looked into.
Name one good reason why the United States of America should give Russia control of any of our uranium. There's not one good reason to do that.
Well, I haven't read the specs of the deal, but from what I understand, no uranium actually left the United States. It was to get 20% control of a company that produces uranium. Did any uranium leave the United States of America and end up in Russia? I mean, absolutely not.
This is why the investigation. Well, you don't know that. How do you know that?
Well, that's what's been reported, that there was no changing of hands of any of this.
Yeah, except more than $100 million in donors going to the Clinton Foundation.
So it's access to power is what I'm hearing you say.
And
Russia is such a bad actor when it comes to 100%. It's not just that they put it on their pickup and they took it out. It's the fact that they have control, right? And look at what they do in their part of the world with control over energy. Crimea, Ukraine. Look at the people in those countries and how they've suffered at the hands of Russia over the issue of energy.
100%. And last week on Outnumbered, we discussed it last Wednesday, I think, or last Tuesday, and I said I am absolutely for getting to the bottom of every issue here. What bothers me is to see the chief of staff poo-pooing the Mueller investigation, saying it's distracting the president, while saying, yes, we need a special counsel for Hillary.
Great to see you both. Thank you. And they went right back to arguing. Right back. Meet with corporate and small business owners earlier today. He was talking tax reform there, tax cuts, the corporate tax cut, this phase-in that they may do over 5 years is on the table. And then he's now supposed to be in the next few seconds meeting with House Speaker Paul Ryan. That is behind closed doors. Any news made will tell you. I'm Harris. Here's Dana.